It's a pleasure to welcome Peg Syverson here today. I'm sure that most of you know that Peg is a co-teacher along with Flint Sparks at Appamata. What you might not know is that Peg has been working along with Open Doors Zen Community since it began. After about 10 years of gathering together for retreats with Flint, a group of folks decided to offer a precepts class. It was built on Peg's offering at Appamata. And so we're very grateful. That class led to the formation of our Sangha, the Open Doors Zen Community. Peg has also joined us before, offering summer retreats at Threshold and at Holy Wisdom. And in the fall, she joined us to officiate at the entrustment ceremony for Suzanne and Josh from the UK. It's great to have her in our Cloud Zendo here again today. Mm-hmm. Integral to today's theme is the support of ancestors. Embedded in Peg's work is the embodied presence of her teacher, Joko Beck. I have a piece of coal on my altar right here. In recognition of Joko's teaching on nothing special. You may remember that we studied Joko's teachings on the 6 perfections when we were still meeting at First Congregational Church. And so now, in a way, we're picking up where we left off, and this time considering how do we belong and what do we belong to. Welcome, Peg.
Thank you so much, Kathy. It's such a delight to be meeting with you in this way. And so today we're coming together for this retreat, supporting each other by our presence, even in this new virtual way. So I'm so delighted to know that we've gathered from the UK, from the Austin Sangha, and from many other places around the country. I've been asked to say something today about belonging and what it means to belong to a Sangha. What I'm going to share is more a set of reflections than a formal talk. But first, I want to recognize the historic and present circumstances of racism, genocide, cruelty, and oppression that have created unimaginable suffering for Native Americans, African Americans, Japanese and Chinese and Latinx immigrants, and many other groups which have suffered individual and collective violence, structural and systemic oppression, and exclusion from all forms of belonging. This talk will not address these karmic force fields that we are all ensnared in. We've been studying them in our Liberating Dharma program at Appamata, and I know you have also been studying them at Open Doors Sangha. I can only acknowledge that as an elder straight white woman, the privileges I've benefited from and my aspiration to use that privilege to create and sustain a karmic force field of good, and to invite and encourage others to do the same. For me, the best approach seems to be in helping people wake up to the lived reality and grow up in their responsibility to others and to the world. So this talk reflects that aspiration. This topic, first of all, called to mind a story I want to share with you. Some years ago, my sister met someone, and in the course of their conversation, they discovered that they had both grown up in military families, constantly moving. My sister said that elementary school was painful, and it was hard to make new friends all the time, and she never felt like she really belonged. Her companion said that whenever she went into a new school, she went straight to the principal's office and asked to join the newcomers club. Most often the principal would say, "We don't have a newcomers club," to which she would reply, "Well, you do now." I often think of the resourcefulness of that little girl and her determination to belong, to create the experience of belonging for herself and for others. In our spiritual path, we can adopt that same cheerful resourcefulness and determination, creating what may not already exist for us, as we had to do long ago with Appamata. Anthropologists and archaeologists have found that we evolved as social animals, banding together in groups for safety, for hunting, and for raising families. This turned out to be a great evolutionary advantage. It became important to be accepted by the clan. As if you were outcast, you were vulnerable. You could easily be killed or starve to death in hard times, or die from lack of care when you were sick or injured. We are hardwired for this need for belonging. We are beings whose general nature is to love, laugh, mourn, argue, eat, and sleep together. We seek our own kind for comfort, safety, wisdom, care, and connection. Of course, there are people who find themselves, or prefer to be, isolated in solitude. But even so, they must be supported by others, those who grow food and bring it to market, those who keep the lights on and the water supply flowing. We have the bitter experience in Texas recently of desperation when those systems fail. We can feel how primal that longing for connection is. It's part of what has made the pandemic so painful. It is at the heart of loving families as well as extremist political groups. If we cannot find nourishment in healthy connections, this longing will lead us inexorably into unhealthy ones. QAnon, jihadis, toxic marriages, gangs, all of which offer the experience of belonging, connection, and care while dragging us into a dark world of violence and suffering. It's important to be discerning about what we belong to. In Charles Vogel's book, The Art of Community, there are 7 principles for belonging that he's identified in his experience with groups of every kind and size, from neighborhood supper clubs to international organizations. His book is not about how to create community. It is about what it is that creates a feeling of belonging in its members. He makes a very important distinction that defines a community. He says, I define a community as a group of individuals who share a mutual concern for one another's welfare. It's distinct from a group whose members may share ideas, interests, proximity, or any number of things, but lack concern for one another. When we see that others are concerned about our own welfare, we'll invest more in building community with them, and we'll feel more connected. I know some of you are very familiar with Vogel's book, but it's worth quickly reviewing his key points here for those who may not have studied it. Some of Vogel's 7 principles obviously have to be reimagined in the time of pandemic, when most of our interactions are online rather than in person. But here's what he's identified. The first principle is the boundary principle. No matter how permeable or open, a community has some boundary that distinguishes it from the general population. There has to be a sense that there's a there. 2, second principle, the initiation principle. We all want to know we're truly accepted into the community we join. An initiation is any activity that's understood as official recognition and welcome into the community. In our Sangha, that's the function of orientation. 3, the rituals principle. He writes, a ritual is any practice that marks a time or event as special or important. The actions are imbued with meaning. They connect the present with things in the past and our hope for the future. Psychologist Roy Baumeister's survey of 400 people distinguished between happiness and meaningfulness. It indicates that meaningfulness involves understanding our own lives beyond the present time and place. It comes when we reflect on what came before and how we're connected to the future. Meaningfulness comes when we integrate now with the future and past. Meaning creates a feeling of stability in the midst of change. Rituals are a tool to bring meaning into our lives. Later, we'll have an opportunity to explore this concept more deeply. Our Zen rituals include meditation practice, ceremonies, inquiry, morning service, and intensives like this one. The 4th principle is the temple principle. A temple, he says, is simply a place where people with shared values enact their community's rituals. Members know it's where they will find their community. In some ways, the temple represents the community's strength and legitimacy. It's a sacred place, a place set aside for a particular use. He goes on to add any space can be made a temple simply by members gathering there and enacting rituals. And an online destination can absolutely become a type of community temple. The temple is created as soon as members know that they'll find their community there and they can enact some rituals meaningful for them. For the time being, our temple is this Zoom space. The fifth principle is the stories principle. Stories are the most powerful way we humans learn. Sharing certain stories deepens a community's connections. If people don't know or can't learn your stories, they don't know or understand your community. They can't know who you are, what you do, or how what you do matters. Stories are how members, future members, and outsiders learn the values and the value of community. The stories must be shared so that members can understand the community's authentic values and identity. In all great religions, there are stories that must be known if one is to understand the tradition, such as Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. I would add that we also need the stories about this particular Sangha, how it evolved and grew. In community, we share origin stories, values stories, vulnerable stories, and personal stories. These stories are ways of making meaning and connection. The sixth principle is the symbols principle. Symbols are powerful tools in building community because they quickly remind us of our values, identity, and commitment to community. Symbols represent a set of ideas and values, which is to say they often represent many things at once. In our Zen community, for example, an altar is rich with symbols, and our understanding of its meanings changes and grows over time, whether it's a personal altar at home or an altar in a temple. The seventh and final principle is the inner rings principle. We all want to be special to someone or several someones, he says. In community, there are formal inner rings with official memberships, and there are many more informal inner rings. We all aspire to belong to the prestigious inner rings, perhaps not just for authority and respect, but for new ways to participate and contribute. This desire is so powerful that we're rarely satisfied with the rings we already inhabit, he says. This principle struck me so forcefully that I created an image of the most well-defined rings of participation for Appamada. You can find it on the website under Study, Appamada Practice Map. This map should orient you to the various levels of participation that you may be interested in exploring at Appamada, or probably at Open Door as well. So these 7 principles have illuminated and helped us envision what can foster a sense of belonging for those drawn to Appamada. Sometimes, people who are new express a sense of frustration or alienation, the sense that they do not belong or do not know how to belong to our community. So I wanted to clarify this a little bit. First of all, you do not belong to a Sangha. A Sangha belongs to you. A Sangha has only 2 functions, and it is designed to provide a scaffold for these functions. The first function is supporting you on your spiritual path of waking up and growing up. Spiritual friends and teachers are fundamental to that support. The second is to provide a living exemplar and expression of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, conveying this light across space and time. Such illumination has been shared warm hand to warm hand for over 2,500 years and around the world. Spiritual friendship and the profound teachings of the Buddha provide a vibrant environment for awakening and for discovering true liberation for ourselves and for others. In the process, we heal the world and dispel gloom and darkness. We belong to each other because we come together to share this journey and to support each person on their path. We are each teaching and learning the Dharma of our unique life, moment by moment, breath by breath. The Dharma challenges all of our beliefs about ourselves, other people, and the world. This path can be difficult at times, and so it's helpful to have allies and guides familiar with the terrain. We belong to you because we are committed to our vow for the liberation of all beings. We offer meditation, shared inquiry, teachings, and warm connection in the practice of our vow. So the question is never whether you belong. It is how you will uniquely express your own way of belonging to that which is already intrinsically yours. You may notice familiar patterns of conditioning arise, thoughts of being left out, or resentments toward a perceived in-group, or confusion about how to belong, or any of literally thousands of habits and beliefs around connection, distance, care, autonomy, and processes of joining, sustaining, and leaving groups. These patterns are part of the inquiry sanghas are almost designed to evoke. What do you belong to? That is, where have you placed your trust, your time, your energy, your attention, and your resources? This, too, is a valuable inquiry. The first thing we have to recognize is that we belong to our conditioning. It is how we define ourselves to ourselves and others. It filters our perceptions of ourselves, others, and the world, and it limits our thoughts, words, and actions. It is not bad or wrong, and our purpose in Zen practice is not to get rid of our conditioning. But it does shape and limit our experience in ways that are sometimes painful or even harming to ourselves and others. And in that way, we are not free. By recognizing conditioning as it is arising, we create a space for awareness and freedom in our thoughts, words, and actions. We literally step into a new reality of unlimited potential. That is where we belong. And if you want to belong to that reality, there are spiritual friends here to share the journey with you. These warm connections create a powerful force for the expression of wisdom and compassion in the world. You belong, first of all, to yourself. In honoring your own journey in this life, you can commit to the unique way you are waking up to your life and growing up in it. Then you belong to others, the relationships that surround you, support you, and challenge you to learn and grow. And you belong to this world, its incessant activity and complexity, its beauty and its ugliness, its turmoil and cruelty and compassion, suffering and joy. So ultimately, you must know that there cannot be any barrier between you and the whole universe. It would be a ludicrous notion. Nothing is withheld from you. The entire universe is continuously unfolding with astonishing creative energy. And you are not merely observing or even immersed in it. You are that. There's nothing anywhere in the universe, no matter what our opinions are, that does not belong. For some reason, we fight this reality tooth and nail. Further, I want to say something about the topic of belonging and commitment to connection versus attachment to some outcome or experience. Or wholehearted openness versus expectation of some feeling, some requirement in relating. It is a big practice challenge to be open and vulnerable with no gaining idea. This is why practice is necessary for most of us. Even my little dog has expectations. She brings her squeaky toy, hoping I'll play, and she gets excited when I put on my coat. But she's not really attached to the outcome. If I can't play, she amuses herself. And if I go out the door without her, she flops down for a nap. Practice helps us cultivate equanimity in meeting and recovering from the ongoing disappointments, losses, and setbacks that create suffering for ourselves and for others. In this way, we can be a true resource for others. We are all in this life together. We can create together, as we have seen, heaven or hell. We belong to a time even more than we can belong to a place, a person, or a thing. More immediately than we can belong to a cause, a profession, a community, a political party, a nation. For each of those can be disrupted, abandoned, or changed. But we are inevitably and unalterably of a time. In our time, along with us, are all the unmistakable events, people, and conditions unique to that moment. We're born into a moment in the lives of our parents, a moment in the surroundings, a hospital, a war zone, the back of a taxi, an old farmhouse. And we're born into a historical moment. For me, the peace and prosperity that followed the end of World War II, and before that, the Great Depression. A moment is fleeting and ephemeral, a dream I call my life, but it's also vast, from the subatomic particles of the atoms of our body to far beyond this earth, the solar system, our galaxy, and this particular universe, among billions and billions of others. Everything is present to us in this moment. We cannot not belong. It's not a feeling of welcome, of trust and ease, of acceptance, approval, or status. Our belonging is an existential reality, not a social contract. From this point, this moment, there cannot be any sense of grasping or fear. We are exactly where we belong because there's no other time than this present moment, which situates us exactly where we belong. Our struggles become kind of comical, almost willfully confusing ourselves and creating suffering for ourselves and for others. So I'm going to invite you into a little bit of reflection, and if you want to make some notes for yourself, that's fine too. First is to consider, what is that experience of belonging in you? What is the felt sense of belonging? Not the what of belonging, what you belong to or what belongs to you, but the inner experience itself. Can you describe it? Is it some form of at-homeness or trust in self and others? Second, what factors, internal and or external, foster that experience for you? When these factors are present, you feel you belong. When they're missing, you don't feel a sense of belonging. What are they? I think for me, it's that sense that here I can make a contribution. Here there's something for me to contribute. Third, you can ask yourself, what kinds of belonging do I seek? A romantic partner, a profession, sports fans, a tribe, a nation, a spiritual community. What do I long to belong to? And here's where we can really use our practice, because the fourth question is, what are my strategies for belonging? For example, I get a sense of belonging by working hard and taking on tasks and responsibilities that others don't want. I seek to make myself available and useful in communities and friendships. Consider, what are our strategies? So the fifth one is a little bit harder. What suffering is created by your strategies for yourself and for others? So obviously these strategies are often successful, or we wouldn't keep using them. But they also create some suffering. So what are those forms of suffering that are created for yourself and for others by your strategies? For myself, I often end up in overwork and overwhelm, or conversely, in anxiety if I don't feel or find a way to feel that I am available and useful enough. And for others, by taking on more than my share of work and responsibilities, I displace others who might benefit and grow by stepping into them. I also make people and systems dependent on my efforts and ignorant about what is actually needed to support the system. So then I had a little space for any other reflections you might have, and you can think about this later too. I thought about this. I'm not working for the approval of others. I feel my efforts are what earn my place at the table, my connection to the community and its well-being. This sense of belonging is satisfied when the group, a class, a family, a sangha, is harmonious, healthy, learning, and warmly connected. When it experiences and expresses mindful, energetic care. So my unit of attention and concern is an ecosystem rather than the happiness or comfort of an individual. I recognize and learned early in my family that sometimes for the health and well-being of an ecological system, such as a family, spiritual community, nation, or planet, it's necessary and responsible to act in ways that will cause suffering, unhappiness, anger, or conflict in an individual, or even many individuals. Climate remediation is our most immediate example of this, or reparations for our history of racial injustice. The responsibility for the vision, confidence, and yes, power to enact what's needed in a system is invested in its leaders. So trust in leadership and in each other is essential for the experience of belonging. And it is vital to communicate honestly and compassionately and frequently to help those struggling to understand, those whose safety and comfort and well-being are at stake. Belonging, or a sense of not belonging, is an anchor for ego and a vector for our ongoing story creation about ourselves and others. I'm always the one left out. Or, there's an elite inner circle that I can never belong to. Someone reached out to me, but I'm not a joiner. I can belong here if I work hard, stay cheerful, and don't disagree with anyone. Or, I'm just an ordinary person. I could never be one of those special spiritual beings here. And on and on. It's all in the word itself. Be-longing. The longing to be. It is a form of grasping or clinging. The ego is always seeking an affirmation of its existence. That affirmation may be positive or negative. Becoming an outlaw can be as satisfying as becoming a hero or a victim. But in any event, it confirms the ego's bottomless need to be seen and confirmed. Whether on the ownership side of belonging, this is my car, my house, my child, my job, they belong to me, or the receiving side, this community accepts me and nurtures me, this family embraces me, our experience of belonging is a map of our ego's values and a measure of the success of its strategies. It's worth sitting today with curiosity and kindness to discover just how this whole ego construction and ego narration works. It can often be the source of unnecessary suffering. I realized that in all of the Zen literature and all of the teachings I've encountered on this path, there is zero mention of any belonging, even in those teachings about Sangha. Most of those teachings focus on harmony created through sincere practice together, our responsibilities toward each other, the abandoning of fixed views that create conflict, and the joy of spiritual friendship. This path is challenging, and we need each other. Traditionally, someone who approached a monastery seeking to join a Sangha was refused. They might even be beaten to drive them away. They would sit at the temple gate on the steps for days, in every kind of weather, rain or snow or heat, not moving, just in hopes of being admitted. Maybe the Tenzo would take pity on them and bring a little food. After days of immobile sitting, they would be brought indoors and put in a seat where they again sat doing nothing but facing the wall until they were allowed to participate in the life of the monastery. This mostly meant hard physical work, scrubbing floors, sweeping the path, raking gravel, emptying the latrines, cooking in the kitchens. Their sincerity and aspiration to belong were severely tested. I suspect that in places where famine was common and devastating, where many were desperate for food and shelter, where people were subject to violence and unchecked crime, monasteries must have been a magnet for those who were seeking safety and comfort more than a spiritual path. So probably the monasteries had to somehow determine the sincerity and purpose of those who showed up at the gate. There was no casual belonging, as we see in so many contemporary sanghas in the West. The spiritual path and the formation of a Buddhist sangha is deep and profound. Some say it can only unfold over many lifetimes. In Zen teaching, the entire path is the totality of this moment, this being time, and our inaction and embodiment of it. It would be ridiculous to think that you could somehow not belong to the moment, this immediate situation. It would be an absurd fantasy. Whatever it is, however you think of it, awful, fun, exciting, horrific, sad, loving, boring, you are somehow right there in it. It's the moment at the Thanksgiving table when your aunt makes an ugly racist remark, the moment you confess you are in love, the moment you hold someone's hand for the last time, the moment your child asks the question you've dreaded. There's no escape. If you let egoic mind spin the story about it, you will lose the immediacy of the moment, and your opportunity for that fresh, awake experience will also be gone. Whole lives can be lost this way, but you are not lost. I love this David Wagner poem, Lost. Some of you are probably familiar with it. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made a place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. We practice so that we don't lose our lives or our connections to each other. Zazen creates a simplified space and time so that we can practice, building our capacities to meet more complex and challenging situations in our everyday lives. We are training in awakeness compassion, wisdom, and care. Joko called this building a bigger container. There is nothing to belong to, and no one that belongs. We are utterly liberated in open, ever unfolding and enfolding of life itself, not imprisoned by the conditioning of self, its stories, beliefs, ideals, anxieties, moods, sensations, and needs constantly changing. Knowing that this is our natural being, we regard all beings as also like this, hapless prisoners of self-created ecosystems. Compassion, for ourselves and for others, naturally arises, filling us with concern and care. That naturally functioning concern and care for all beings constitutes our ultimate belonging. We belong ultimately and intimately to our deepest, heartfelt aspiration and vow. So we have just a little bit of time for a breakout session. I think I ran just a little bit over, but we have a couple of focus questions, and they're pretty simple. For you, what creates a sense of belonging? And what are your strategies for belonging or not belonging? And how do they affect you and others? So we have on the schedule now a Dharma activity, which I think some of you may have done before, but it's always different every time we do one of these activities. It's always, we get a little bit different insights. So just to explain a little bit about it, this Dharma activity is called Taking Our Places. And this activity helps us get a sense of how we belong in this time and space and grounds us in how we're connected with and responsible to others. So first of all, you have to get a sense, this is always a little bit challenging if you don't know, you get your orientation of where north is. Do you have some sense of where north is in your space? If you don't have any idea where north is, make a good guess. And because we'll be using sort of the cardinal directions to orient this activity. So you'll want to be able to stand up and face north. As you're facing north, reflect on the past generations before us, our parents and grandparents, teachers, Zen ancestors, and myriad generations stretching into the distant past around the world. Take 3 deep breaths and envision them, stretching out beyond you in a vast array. Standing before them, what do you want to say to them? Say it out loud or silently. Take your time. If you find yourself complete, just stand in silence, contemplating the experiences of those past generations. Turning to face the south, turn all the way around. Reflect on the future generations, young people today, their children and grandchildren, and all the children still to be born, generation after generation, as far into the future as you can imagine. Take 3 deep breaths and envision them. Standing before them, what do you want to say to them? Say it out loud or silently. Take your time. When you're complete, just stand contemplating their lives stretching out before us. Now, facing to the east, turn so you're facing the east. Reflect on all those standing shoulder to shoulder with you in this time, our peers and contemporaries, all those who inhabit the earth right now. It's vast, vast numbers of people. Take 3 deep breaths and envision them standing with you around the world in every circumstance, rich, poor, in cities and villages, healthy or sick, in peace or conflict, every size, shape, and color, all those who share this earth and share this time. What do you wish to say to them? Say it out loud or silently. When you're complete, just stand and contemplate that vast array. What is their experience? Now, facing to the west, reflect about on the people who are part of the Sangha, people you know well and people you may not know quite so well, people who may be new to you, people you've known a long time. All those who practice together in this path right now, who are close to you. And then beyond that, the other Dharma Zen practitioners. And beyond that, all of the Buddhists all over the world who are present right now, standing with you. You belong there. What do you wish to say to them? Say it out loud or silently. When you are complete, just stand in contemplation. So in a little bit, we'll have an opportunity to talk about what we discovered in this little activity. But first, I think it'd be nice to have an opportunity to say something into the whole group, whatever came up for you or whatever you discovered that you would like to share with the whole group. So I think probably the way this would be best handled is raise your hand if you'd like to share something that came out of this activity. And then I think you can be unmuted, right, Suzanne? Can you unmute them or the open door?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, we cannot unmute them. I have to unmute themselves.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you'll be unmuting yourself.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
In every direction, all I could think of was gratitude. Well, and then the details about that gratitude, past, present, future, everything just came up as gratitude. I'm really grateful for that experience.
Yes, Nelda.
an experience I didn't expect. When I was facing west, I looked directly at the house across the street from me, where someone of a different political party than I lives. And the first thing I felt was tremendous love, despite our differences and that huge flag he flew. And gratitude that he and his family have helped teach me patience and refined me. So love and gratitude.
Ellen.
Also gratitude, and for each direction, the Brahma Viharas came up, and a sense of, and ultimately a sense of timelessness of the moment.
It's so vast, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This present moment. It includes all of that.
Jan.
Hi. Thank you for this practice. It was wonderful. For me, what came up in all four corners was the feeling and thought of forgiveness and grace for the tenderness and newness of human beings, past, present, and future, and how young we are. And I felt this, especially for my ancestors, my white ancestors. It was an important thing for me to forgive. So thank you.
Kathy.
Two things came up for me. I was struck by the horrors of war that have been going on since forever. And it occurred to me that it's driven a lot, either sometimes by religious zealots. And so I asked people to please let go of that. And also this feeling of scarcity, this feeling of scarcity. And I guess I believe in my bones that there's enough for all. And so I kind of made a prayer that we could share the wealth of the earth, and so that we would have peace. And I also, the second thing was that I found myself doing a metta practice. And when I said, may I be healthy, what came up was through all three tiers, and may I support the happiness of all being. And it felt like this is correct. Like I want to get out of I and always kind of live within us. So thank you.
Gratitude and love in all directions, as people have said, but tears in the direction of future, tears of sweetness and love for my sons and grandchildren, whom I know deeply and love deeply. And then hope and fear for what may be facing all of them into the future, and the loving kindness, like may they tend the earth, and may they appreciate all that's here, and may they work to foster connection. But for me, it was the place of tears.
I can't remember who Flint was quoting when he said, live to the point of tears, but that's where we are, right? We're right on the edge of tears.
Yeah.
So in terms of the young people, I can't remember what the thing was, but it was definitely for them to be the beautiful people that they are now, just to stay who they are. And there was a gratitude thing. What I was surprised at is, look, I've had a very privileged life, and what I was confused because when I looked into the past to my ancestors, there was one particular, my grandfather, and there was something very, who I loved more than anything, but there was something very icky there that I have to, work with because I got stuck there. And that was interesting. I mean, like, why did I get stuck with this one, one kind of thing I knew about him?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. We never know what's going to come up in this activity, I think. Sandy, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, what came up for me with each one was the oneness, the connectedness, and my sense of myself is separate generally, and each direction I felt gratitude and oneness. It was quite a beautiful experience. Thanks for that, Peg.
Maria.
Yeah, I guess to reiterate just what a wholesome, wonderful experience that was, quite powerful, really. And I think when I was looking back at the ancestors, kind of way back, I noticed I skipped the recent ones and had to come back to them.
Jump right over them.
But kind of like a real sense of support and togetherness and connectedness. And then when I was looking ahead at the younger ones, at the future, it was like a real sense of, I'm here, I'll always be here, and I already love you. And it was like a real sort of overwhelming feeling of like support from one end, and then kind of passing that forward, paying it forward, if you like. And then when we were all stood together with the Sangha, that was just wonderful. That was just an incredible feeling of belonging, community, of strength, of love. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So I really appreciated it. I felt completely immersed and connected and with everybody. So thank you.
Kim.
I guess similar to what Maria was saying, except instead of it being love, it was like a vow to heal. And to look back and to see all the foundational, energy that has come to support my life, and the gratitude I feel for that, and yet all of the suffering that also has been passed through me. And then looking into the future, just wanting to stand so clearly in my vow and in this broader community, to commit to, trying to heal what I can so that the brokenness doesn't get passed on. And really feeling my limitations. I appreciated you saying, like, we belong to our conditioning.
Yeah.
So I feel that too. And then the last thing was when we turned towards, now I can't remember what direction, but the Sangha was sort of allowing it all to collapse in, and the Sangha to be more than this, which is beautiful and is like a warm blanket. but to allow that broad sense of, yeah, just support that is there.
I think it's so funny because my experience with this exercise was first with Lynn Twist, who introduced it to me at a workshop called The Soul of Money, of all things. And I was so struck by it. I mean, my primary feelings were grief and apology. So for all that I have not been able to do or fix or heal. So I felt such a sense of my own inadequacies or incapacities. So it's interesting, everything that can come up. Sometimes it's not always, all happy feelings. Sometimes you need to mourn the losses or mourn the sense that there's so much to be done, and we feel so small in it. So that's part of what I've experienced. Maybe some folks had some touch of that kind of sadness and sense of, oh, I wish I could have done more, or somehow been bigger in the work of healing and remediation and so forth. So, yeah, so it's interesting. All kinds of things can come up in this exercise, and I don't want to give the impression that it's just always going to be a happy experience. Sometimes we really confront our own mortality, our own limitations, and who we are, and we have to grieve those losses too. Yeah.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Pardon?
What I'm struck with is in listening to everybody, knowing that we're all being informed by our current situations
Mm-hmm.
and how the variability of that. And it didn't feel individual to me at all.
Yeah.
I had a sense that everyone was speaking for me and I was speaking with everyone. As this feels like one voice, and yet each voice is being informed by our own life circumstances. I'm very much appreciating that right now.
Good. Yeah, that's a lovely way to put it too. Yeah. Oh, voices of one organism, right? One living organism.